How's it going, Speedsters? Welcome to a brand new Flash episode breakdown and review. Now this is for episode 4, titled the one, not episode 4, tomorrow about, episode 6, titled the one with the 90s. And just like Cisco and Chester, P. Rank, I have also gone back in time, because as you can tell, when I shave, I kind of de-age by at least 5 years. So don't worry, if you don't recognize me, I'm still Boba. But yeah, what do I think of this episode? Because it's just fascinating. Recently, you know, my Flash reviews, they haven't been the most kind of ecstatic I've been about the show, despite still loving the show. Last week's review, I think, got the most dislikes I've had in a Flash video in probably forever. It's not loads, it's just, there's obviously a difference. When you have people watching you, I guess if they're such big fans of the show and you do breakdowns, they don't want to necessarily hear, I guess, quote-unquote negative things, but you know, I'm here to talk about my thoughts, my opinions. Sometimes I might not like an episode, but today's episode, I've been wondering if those people who disliked my last video, probably thinking Boba really didn't like this episode, because I have to say, this was arguably fillery, whilst, you know, filler episodes do still kind of cement in or try and address the main plot or the main fishy thing going on, which we're currently in with the forces. And, you know, funnily enough, I enjoyed this episode a lot more than last week's episode. Granted that it was, you know, it was still an episode. I'm still going to give it like an and I think probably a lot of you could understand why, but the thing is, I still had moments in this episode that I enjoyed. I'm not so on board with some things more than other things. This is the episode of The Flash without The Flash. Technically, you had him in the last few minutes, but still, this is a Flashless episode, which lent a lot of character development, I suppose you could say. Not really a lot, they just gave him like a foundation, for once, and that is Chester P. Rank, and we'll get onto him in just a second. But Barry, in the meantime, is in his coma. We have the embodied Speedforce, which, yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts on that, and I would love to compare my notes with your notes, saying that she's giving all the strength she can to heal him. And yeah, we just kind of have the Speedforce walking around in a literal body. And I'm just not so sure how I feel about that, even though I am and have been a fan of this before. This progresses on to this Speedforce explanation. Speedforce Nora says, "When I was reborn, I was surrounded by light and love," which I guess makes sense, especially with the dialogue in that episode when Barry and Iris came, you know, she gave him the Speedforce. She was like, "You're my lightning rod." You know, all that, I guess it makes sense with what she's saying there. Then came the pain. I could feel these forces of nature were like me, but only evil. She suspects that these other forces are out to kind of feed on her, or like the Speed Force, if that makes sense. And then we had that moment where Chester was kind of like fanboying out, and like we have the Speed Force saying like, "Yes, Chester, I am the Speed Force." So let me, I guess, address my issues with this, or just like my opinion of why I'm not so on board with this. And my next example kind of goes into helping me articulate this. For example, when we had Iris talking to the Speed Force some more in the episode, who's currently hovering over Barry at this point, and there's definitely some sus stuff to that, which we'll get into towards the end of this review. And she was explaining Barry's blanket burrito to the Speed Force, and I'm just not down with that. I prefer it when the Speed Force was more of this, as she kind of said herself, like lightning-y kind of mysterious force. I didn't mind when Barry would interact with her every now and again when he went in the Speed Force, or for example the season 3 ending when it was the Nora who grabbed Barry's hand and they walked into the Speed Force together. Like, that is all fine. I'm completely fine with her being in this manifested body in the way she kind of wants to appear to Barry, because she figures, at least for now, that's like a good way to appear as his mother. That's all cool, but when you're like getting to the point where the Speed Force is kind of in a lot of scenes doing things that I don't know if I like, learning what it's like to be engulfed in like a little blanket, saying it's like feeling a bunch of warmth and hugs and stuff, and I'm just like, no, I think this is going too far across the line. Like, if I was in the writer's room, I'd be like, yeah, bring Nora back in as a Speed Force, like, person again, and that's how the Speed Force is deciding to show itself, but don't have a go to Jitters to drink a coffee and experiencing what it's like to be in Barry's blanket burrito. And there was just a few other things where I just feel like, okay, that's stepping the line. You've kind of ruined the cool Speed Force mysticism to all of that complex stuff. Now, I know some of you, and I see why they did this. I guess there is an appeal where it's like, oh, look, Speed Force in body, Speed Force experiencing human things. But like, for me, nah, I feel like it's getting a bit too kind of cheesy with that. Despite loving the actress who plays Nora, despite really enjoying her in the past. The way they've decided to spend the Speed Force's physical body moments in the show, I've always been a fan of. But this, long story short, without me dragging on and on about the same point, I think you guys can understand, and I hope you respect this opinion. It's just too eccentric of what you're doing to that weird force. Like, the Speed Force is a freaking person now who goes off to Jitters and drinks a coffee. Like, that's just strange to me. It's not what I envision personally, but that's fine. I completely understand this is, I guess, subjective, but it's not how I would handle the Flash's Speed Force, to put it bluntly. This story continued along in the episode where, as I said, after Speed Force, Nora rushed off to Jitters. She started getting really upset after Iris kind of revealed to her that Barry's mother's death still very much so weighs on him, and like she has this epiphany. It's like, oh crap, that's how I'm appearing to him. She offers to change her appearance and appear in her true form from now on, which is Lightning, which, you know, would be kind of cool. I guess, like, for me now, what's done is done, and we just have to stick out through what they're trying to do with her being in a body. But we will revisit the Speed Force stuff towards the end of this review, because there's some fishy stuff that Nora's been kind of poking around here and there and wanting to stay behind at Star Labs, and I want to get in some theories with that. But this episode, let's get onto the main waft of it, and that is Chester and Cisco time traveling. Chester initially developed some things that boosted the isotopes in order to track Fuerza or Psyche, and Cisco and Chester eventually just go to set one of these up on the outskirts of the city, and when they activate it, this big green wave comes at them, and their phones disappear, as does the van, and then they essentially realize they've traveled back to the 90s. Now, fully transparent here, I do admit, when I saw the promo for this episode last week, I was just kind of thinking, after not being so on board with the past few episodes, sure, I still enjoy moments here and there and whatnot. I was like, great. Yeah, sure, look, I don't want to knock it before I see it, but like another CW, oh, like we've gone back to the 90s, got our little turtle hats on. It's just, do you see what I mean? I was kind of thinking, okay, I don't want to expect too much from this one. I knew, as I mentioned earlier, just because they're filler episodes doesn't mean that they don't address like the main overarching kind of story going on, which is obviously right now with the forces and what this means and la-di-da-da. But I still was thinking, great. But I enjoyed it more than what I thought I would. And this is an unpopular opinion to an extent, I suppose, because whenever I've voiced this before, I've seen people reply that they don't kind of, let me just say it first. I've quite liked Chester P. Rung ever since his kind of backdoor audition to the show to be that series regular, and I really like him. I really do. I get why people might not, because you can tell his humor is very, very evidently placed there, like obviously, and maybe it feels maybe too try-hardy for some people, but I feel like he pulls it off very, very well in a way that doesn't feel cheesy to me. And trust me, I'm extremely sensitive to stuff like that, but I don't feel that with Chester. And yeah, this episode, the scenes where he did get a scene with his dad, and we're getting that exploration to how his father died, and this just happened to be the day before his father died. It was very kind of cliche, kind of, oh, let's give some stories to Chester, okay, put his dad in, but I still enjoyed it. Do you know what I mean? Long story short here, though, because it's quite straightforward, they make a new sensor to find out where this new force is coming from. It takes them to the school where they were needing to blend into the 90s, even though nobody questions why these two old guys are, like, in their high school. But either way, you know, they audition the kids. Normally, as I said, I'd be rolling my eyes at this, unless I was really enjoying it. And I was not in between, I was much more towards the boat of enjoying it. I think that's a credit and to be attributed to Cisco and Chester, the actors behind them. The chemistry doesn't feel completely fake, or, you know, like, I guess what I'm trying to draw a comparison to there is, with all due respect to the actor, but Camilla and Cisco, I don't see any chemistry there. It's plain as a blank white page, if I'm being honest. Like, seriously, no disrespect, but that's how I feel about that character. I don't feel that vibe between Chester and his dynamic with Cisco. It works. It's actual fluid fun that's going on whenever they're together. He can also balance emotion there because of the scenes with his father, obviously. So that's why I feel like I was still enjoying this, albeit I think I knew what I was getting into. Barry was in his coma healing the whole time, and I wasn't setting up too much expectation for myself, other than I was very locked into, okay, so what are they going to do with the Nora stuff? Like, what is going on with her and these other forces? And I knew eventually towards the end of this episode, that would be given the next bullet point in terms of story. As I said, with the filler episodes, they don't give you like a whole new paragraph of main plot stuff. It's usually like the next chunk of bullet point until you get to the next episode, which is more, you know, overarching story focused. And this did give us that. This did turn into a bit of a Groundhog Day, which which is where Cisco initially forgets. We got the references to like Game of Thrones. You need a modern reference to jolt them back to reality, so to speak. What did I actually think of the dad scene? I felt like it was organic at first, but then I kind of almost got out of it with how long it went on, to the point where I thought like, yeah, but at the end of the day, these are two strangers seemingly to the father, and I don't know if they would get that sentimental. Like, it was definitely a TV moment, but it still made the audience, I think, or at least hopefully for those who really didn't care about Chester, care about him a little bit more, because, you know, when you have a bit of wish-washy music in the background, you're kind of having a sentimental moment with the character, sometimes it kind of hits and plucks one of those heartstrings, and I had a little bit of that during this scene. I already liked Chester anyway, so I was completely fine with it, but I would love to know what you guys thought of that. I also really liked how later on in the episode, he found one of his father's blueprints to carry on the project that his father was working on when he died, so I'm guessing this could just be a throwaway scene that was just to fulfill and complete his story arc this episode with his personal character development, but I like to think that that blueprint will come back to serve the team later on, maybe. That's just a little prediction. It could not, but we're gonna have to wait and see. But this is where we got like the time or still force version of the money man from The Flash. If any of you have watched you've watched The Flash, do you remember the money guy in the Run Iris Run episode? This was like that guy, but with the still force. He wasn't as bad. I'll give him that. He really wasn't. But it was that over kind of dramatized, acted like, I hate my future kind of thing. Like it was alright. I'm more just interested in the fact that let me address the first thing, because this is 100% a pattern now. People, and I'm not necessarily saying this was done in the exact same way, but it's 100% the same approach, and I'm addressing many of your comments right now to where a lot of you said, great, another villain that got talked down through the power of love or something like that. Now, this isn't exactly the same, because like they didn't exactly defeat him or talk him down in terms of like permanently defeating him, because he disappeared and he will obviously be coming back again. That's insanely obvious. But once again, Chester, and I'm not necessarily knocking this, I'm just pointing out something that this season is evidently doing, and I'm not saying everything has to be brute force speedster punches or anything like that, but I feel like any villainous or meta villain encounter we've had so far, including David the Smolcian's Abracadabra this week's episode, Barry reaching out to Ava McCulloch in the first, few episodes, and when that story arc finally finished before we got on to the season 7 storyline in episode 3, what has happened? It's been that speech. Chester reaches out to Dion, not letting one moment in the past define all of his moments in the future kind of speech. And look, I'm not saying I have a massive issue with this, it's just the comments in my previous videos are 100% right. Team Flash are resolving every problem this season thus far through talking to said villain. Whether it's the main villain or a meta villain, they are talked down through the power of love. And, I don't really know how to feel about that. I think this will start irking me if this happens again. And then again and again and again. And then I'll be like, okay, okay, I understand why you spoke Ava down, where you kind of reached out to Abracadabra. It makes sense with the story they wrote for the script in that episode. But when it gets to a point where you do it again and again and again with every villain or every meta that you come across, whether it's a meta of the week or the next Godspeed thing, whether it makes sense to that character or the story and how you could, in theory, talk him down, I'm pretty sure fans of the show won't want to see a talking down cliche speech every week. Just don't carry this on for everything, because you have so far. Ava, Abracadabra, freaking Still Force guy, maybe I'm forgetting about another person, but yeah, you get my point. We saw Iris with the afro, she looks pretty damn awesome, I have to admit, and this moment was just hilarious when we had Joe coming in. We had Killer Frost in her 90s get-up, and I feel like I have to address this. I kind of wish that Team Flash was scaled down to just Chester being a new series regular, and then we have like Barry, Killer Frost, like the OG days, season 1, season 2, you didn't have loads of extra people. I just feel like, think about it, where's Allegra been? Like, does it really matter where she's been? That's my point. And same with Camilla. I just feel like it's unnecessary, and I'm probably going to get a comment from somebody saying, Baby, you're misogynistic, what you don't like those women characters? No, it's nothing to do with that. I just feel like whatever screen time we're going to get with them in the future is going to be a bit of a yawn, because I don't feel like many people are massive fans of Camilla. Allegra, I will give you, has a lot more to offer to the show, and she's done bits, but I still feel like what we've got with her has been really subpar, whereas Camilla's been very, very, very subpar. To a point where it's just like, Chester's awesome. Give me Chester any day. Cisco, great. We've got Killer Frost on the show. I just feel like it can be that small. You don't need to have all these characters. I don't know, it's just another thing I wanted to chuck out there. Either way though, ladies and gentlemen, Barry's vitals stabilized by the end of the episode. They don't know who or when Dion may be hiding, so he will be coming back. This is where we got some fishy moments throughout the episode. I'm going to talk about this for a couple of minutes because it is very interesting, and maybe some of you guys picked it up as well. But we had that moment where it's kind of like foreshadowing there was something more fishy. It's like, okay, wait, not once did he mention chasing after Nora or the Speedforce, and he's arguably the most powerful force. The Still Force, which is, by the way, when we got the names, the Still Force, which makes Fuerza the Strength Force, and Psyche the Sage Force. So we got the names. We got the names, like, said now. But notice how Nora in those moments, like, well maybe, like, he doesn't... Nora's putting the blame on these other forces for, like, wanting to feed on her, but I feel like there's this weird awkwardness that they made very obvious that she's wanting to stay in Star Labs, for example. She wanted to stay there rather than go to Barry and Iris's, but when they offer or insist, it's like, okay, yeah, I'll come, but I kind of wanted to stay here just in case one of the forces alert the satellites, and Iris is just like... Yeah, but like we'll get an alert for that. So like, what is she not telling the team? I'm interested in that. I'm definitely interested in that. So I don't want you guys to get the wrong impression. I don't mind the Speed Force being embodied into a body. But when it comes to the blanket stuff and like coffee at Jitters and thinking this person as this elemental universal force, it's just a bit too far-fetched for me. But I'm definitely intrigued with the low-key implied mystery that they're setting up with how the Speed Force isn't being fully transparent. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the Speed Force is a villain. I just know she's not being transparent about something that I couldn't tell you what it's about, but it's involving the other forces. Perhaps maybe the Speed Force is inadvertently doing something bad, and these other forces, the Still Force, Sage Force, and Strength Force, are only attacking her because maybe she's doing something that is negative. I don't know, but like she's obviously wanting to take them out in a way before she gets taken out, which is why she's always adamant about staying behind, seeing if there's a ping for these other forces. Do you know what I mean? So there's definitely something going on there. So I'm looking forward to see that story continue. All in all, this episode was a fillery one with a couple of bullet points of progression for the main story. But overall, I enjoyed it. I wouldn't want this every time. The character development behind Chester was decent enough. It was quite, I would say, typical in a way, but that doesn't necessarily make it bad or anything. I also, it's a bonus that I really like Chester on the team as well. So overall, a thumbs up and kind of a thumb sideways, if you will. I feel like that's becoming my new grading system or something, and I would love to know what you guys thought of it. So let me know your thoughts, obviously, and theories on everything I speculated about with the bonus details down in the comments below. And overall, what are you thinking of this episode, these episodes so far? Are you kind of more like me? It's like, you know, I love The Flash. I'm ride or die with it, despite some of the things I feel like I've grown past with the typical CW formulaic approach to some things, but I'm still very on board with what this show has with its potential, because I know it can always do better. And when we're getting into the speedster stride with the mystery of the one who sent Godspeed back, who wanted ultimate velocity, that's what I'm really signed up for, and I can't wait to get to that. Whereas, you know, just like the comics, you know, I can't really blame myself for not being as engrossed in the Forces storyline. But yeah, I'm interested to see what their stamp is. I just feel like it's not as compelling as other storylines I've had in previous seasons. But anyway, guys, like the video if you did enjoy it. Make sure you click the links in the top pinned comment to follow me on Twitter, to help me out, maybe if you really enjoy this channel by supporting me, maybe pledging through Patreon or the join button on this channel. If you click the join button, you'll be added to this little credit thing, which I am going to make look a lot nicer soon. But thank you to every individual who's helped support the channel. But that is me today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you speedsters in the next video. Goodbye.